Because of me, 100 of my friends were killed. I am a soldier from Afghanistan. I woke up in a white room. The light from the lamp hanging directly above me was so bright it felt like it was piercing my consciousness. My eyes hurt, and my head was throbbing with pain. I raised my hand to my forehead, trying to remember something. But all I received in response was emptiness. The foreign hospital ward was horrifically cold and alien. This was my first memory, not of home, not of childhood, but of this place where there was nothing but silence, snow-white walls, and a constant sense of anxiety. I didn't know who I was. Perhaps I couldn't even recall my name. Fear enveloped me, and it only intensified. When a nurse entered the room, I tried to ask her who I was and why I was there, but the words wouldn't come. She looked at me with sorrow in her eyes and said, "Don't worry, you're safe." But how could I not worry? Safety seemed like something abstract, distant. My body was here, but my consciousness was somewhere far away. I didn't know what to do next and only tried to understand what had happened. The doctor told me that I had been in an accident a few days ago. The car had overturned, and I was found at the scene. He said I was alive only by a miracle, but I didn't feel that miracle. I had amnesia. They assured me it was temporary, but who could know for sure? Each new day was a continuous trial for me, trying to find even a small clue about my own identity. I was told that I had served in the army, that I was a war veteran, but all these words seemed foreign. They talked about me, but it wasn't me. One of the doctors, Dr. Green, brought me cards with photographs and names. These were supposed to be my close ones and friends. I looked at them, but none of the faces were familiar. They were like shadows wandering in my consciousness. With no memory of who I was before, I was empty. The doctors were pleased that I could rest. But how can you rest when your entire life has turned into a blank white spot? My wife, Sarah, came on the third day after the accident. She stood by my bed, holding my hand, but I didn't recognize her. Her tears tore at my heart, but I couldn't say anything comforting to her. She told me about our life, how we met, how we married, and our plans for the future. But all these stories seemed to me like just words. I didn't feel that connection. I tried to remember what those moments looked like, but my memories were empty. After a few days in the hospital, I was told I could be discharged home. I stood in the hospital corridor, feeling the floor tremble beneath my feet. Thoughts swirled in my head. Where was I going? Who was I really? Sarah held my hand like a child just learning to walk. I was lost in this world, and each step felt heavy and painful. Our home was cozy, but I didn't feel at home there. Every detail, every item in the house seemed like it belonged to another life. Sarah showed me our photo albums, talked about our trips, but it all seemed meaningless. I saw only empty faces in the photos. It felt like these people were strangers, and I had accidentally ended up in their lives. At night, when Sarah fell asleep, I would just lie in bed and stare at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. I was afraid to fall asleep, afraid of what might come in my dreams. The dreams came on the fourth day after returning home. They were vivid and nightmarish. I stood in the middle of a desert, surrounded by bodies, all bodies. They were all dressed in military uniforms, but I didn't recognize any of them. I tried to scream, but no sound came out of my mouth. I tried to run, but my legs felt like they were glued to the ground. I woke up, choking on my own scream. Sarah jumped out of bed, trying to calm me down, but I couldn't settle. My heart pounded like a hammer, and my head was on the brink of explosion. This dream marked the beginning of my downfall. Every night, I relived these horrors over and over. They changed, becoming more and more realistic, but always with the same bodies. I didn't know who they were, didn't know why I was having these dreams, but I felt they were somehow connected to my past. Maybe they were my fellow soldiers. Maybe they were people I was supposed to protect. But whatever they were, these visions gave me no peace. One day, I told the doctor about these dreams. He said it was a normal process, that the brain was trying to restore memories, and that dreams were a way the subconscious tried to piece together fragments of broken memory. But his words didn't comfort me. I felt it was more than just dreams. They were too real, too horrifying. Each time I fell asleep, I ended up in a different place. Once it was a burning tank, another time a shot-up checkpoint. All these places were unfamiliar to me, but I felt they were somehow connected to my past. I began to fear falling asleep. I knew something was wrong with me, but I didn't know what. Each night, I hoped that this time would be different, but every dream became more brutal and vivid. I began to avoid sleeping. I watched television until morning, walked outside at night to avoid falling asleep. Sarah noticed that something was wrong with me, but I couldn't explain anything to her. How could I tell her that I was afraid to fall asleep? Because every dream turned into a nightmare. I couldn't allow myself to relax, knowing that as soon as I closed my eyes, I would be pulled back into that labyrinth of fear and pain. The dreams started to haunt me even during the day. I could just be sitting on the couch and suddenly feel the floor beneath me turn into a scorching desert. I saw them, these bodies, even when I was awake. They haunted me completely. I began to lose my sense of reality, unable to distinguish where dreams ended and real life began. The anxiety grew with each passing day. I could no longer tell what was real and what was not. Over time, I realized that these dreams were more than just memory restoration. They were a part of me, a part of what I had lost but couldn't recall. I tried to understand what they meant, why they kept coming back. Maybe they were remnants of my memory trying to break through. Maybe it was my subconscious trying to warn me about something. But whatever it was, I knew one thing. I couldn't live like this anymore. One day, I decided that I couldn't endure it any longer. I told Sarah that I needed to know the truth. I couldn't just sit and wait for these dreams to destroy me. I had to find answers. She tried to stop me, saying I needed to rest, that everything would be okay. But I couldn't wait any longer. I knew that if I didn't do this now, I might lose my sanity. My first stop was the library. I decided to start looking for information about the accident I had been in. But instead of finding any details, I found only more questions. The newspaper article described the accident, but there was no mention of me or what happened afterward. This only intensified my feeling that something was wrong with me. Then I went to the police to learn more about the accident, but they couldn't provide any information either. Everything was murky, just like my memories. It was as if all of it wasn't real. I started doubting every detail of my life. Was it all real? Was Sarah real? Was the war real? I felt as though I had ended up in a past from which there was no escape. Sarah noticed the change in me. She asked why I was so obsessed with these dreams, but I couldn't explain it to her. I tried to tell her that these weren't just dreams, that they meant something, but she didn't understand. She only asked me to calm down, but I couldn't anymore. Each day brought new questions, new fears. The dreams became even more intense. Now I saw not only the bodies, but also faces. Faces of people I had never known, but they looked at me as if I were their enemy. I saw their eyes, filled with pain and hatred, and I didn't understand why they were looking at me that way. I started to fear these dreams even more, but they didn't leave me in peace. I knew I couldn't continue living like this. These dreams, these visions, were destroying me from within. I began to feel like I was losing control over myself, over my mind. I wasn't sure who I was or what was happening to me. I felt like I was losing myself, and it was the most terrifying feeling of all. One night, as I lay in bed trying to fall asleep, I realized I couldn't live like this anymore. I decided I needed to know the truth, no matter how frightening it might be. I couldn't live in fear and uncertainty any longer. I had to unravel this labyrinth, or I would never find peace. The first step on this path was accepting that I might never remember my past. But that didn't mean I couldn't find answers. I needed to discover the truth, even if it was painful. That was the only thing left for me. Find myself, find my memory, and understand who I really am. I could no longer live in the shadow of a past I didn't remember. These dreams were not just memory restoration. They were a key to something bigger, to understanding who I was and why I ended up in this situation. They were a part of me, and I had to unravel them to find my way out of this labyrinth. My mind was trying to tell me something, and I had to listen. It was my only hope. I began to understand that this labyrinth was not just my mind. It was something more. It was a trap I had fallen into, and I needed to find a way out. My struggle was just beginning, but I knew I wasn't alone. Sarah was by my side, and I had to hope that she would help me find a way out of this nightmare. Reddit user, comments user 1234. That sounds terrible, Jackson. It's hard to imagine what you're going through. I think these things mean more than just memories. They could be warnings, or your mind's attempt to find an answer. Army Vet 56. Brother, I've been through this too. PTSD is no joke. Seeking help from specialists made a difference for me. Try not to fight this alone. Dreamer Gal. Your dreams seem like signals your body and mind are trying to send you. They might hold the key to your memories. Don't give up. Realist_9. If you can no longer distinguish reality from dreams, you need to focus on what's around you. Sarah is your support. Hold on to her. She might be your only salvation. Mystic Tales. This sounds like the beginning of something bigger. Maybe you're on the path to discovering something important about yourself and your past. Don't be afraid to seek the truth, even if it's frightening. After the dreams began to consume me, I realized that I could no longer endure this on my own. In the morning, I felt again the emptiness brought by insomnia and decided that I needed help. On May 12th, I reached out to Dr. Amelia Reynolds, a psychotherapist specializing in treating post-traumatic stress disorder. Sarah found her contact through friends who recommended her as the best in this field. I didn't know what to expect from this meeting, but I needed some explanation for the horrors that haunted me every night. Amelia met me in her office, which resembled a cozy library, with every corner filled with books. She asked me to sit down and talk about what was troubling me. I didn't know where to start, but she listened silently, without interrupting as I began to describe my dreams. I detailed every aspect: the deserts, the executioners, the bodies that wouldn't leave me alone. She listened attentively, jotting down notes in her notebook. It was the first conversation where I felt that someone truly wanted to understand what I was going through. Dr. Reynolds asked me about my past, but I only shook my head. I remembered nothing except these dreams. Then she said something that made me think. These are not just fragments of memory, Jackson. Your dreams are a labyrinth trying to connect your past with your present. You need to go through it to understand what is happening to you. Her words sounded like a challenge. I realized that this was not just a struggle with dreams. It was a quest for the truth that I was so afraid of. Each subsequent session with Amelia felt like diving deeper into an ever-expanding sea. She helped me recall early moments that seemed buried in the deepest corners of my mind. Memories began to return, though sporadically. One day, I recalled my name, Jackson Baker. It was like a return to life. This name had significance, but I couldn't grasp why it felt so foreign to me. Over time, I remembered details of my childhood. a house on the outskirts of Tucson, Arizona, where I grew up. My father worked at a factory, and my mother was an elementary school teacher. I recalled the smell of their homemade baking and the warmth brought by family. But these memories felt faded, disconnected from my present life. They were like old photographs that had lost their color. The most difficult part for me was recalling Afghanistan. The dreams about the war carried not only fear, but also confusion. I knew that something terrible had happened there, but my memories were shattered like glass after an explosion. Emilia helped me begin to piece those fragments together. We talked about my feelings during my service, about what drove me to join the military. But the more we dug, the more I felt reality crumbling. Through sessions with Emilia, I remembered the day I signed the contract with the U.S. Army. It was June 15, 2008. I was young, full of energy, and eager to change the world. Military service seemed like something noble and heroic, and I believed I could make a difference. After completing training, I was assigned to the 2nd Battalion, 87th Infantry Regiment, and within a few months, I was on a plane heading to Afghanistan. The first place we were sent to was a small village in northern Afghanistan, Kunduz. At first, the mission seemed straightforward: patrol the area, ensure the safety of local residents, and gather intelligence on Taliban movements. But within a few weeks, it became clear that this was not just a mission. We were in a different world. The enemy was everywhere, and each day turned into a struggle for survival. It was here that I met Michael Carter, whom everyone called Mike. He became my closest friend and fellow soldier. We endured the hardships of war together, supporting each other through the darkest moments. Mike was cheerful and full of life, even amid the horrors of war. He always knew how to lift our spirits, even when things were tough. His support helped me stay afloat. But one day, everything changed. It was October 2009 when we were tasked with patrolling a dangerous area near the Pakistan border. There were exactly 100 of us, and it was supposed to be a routine operation. But the enemy knew about our plans. They set up an ambush. I remember our vehicles being fired upon from all sides, the ground shaking from explosions. It was a real nightmare, where every second could have been the last. Mike was one of the first to die. I saw his body fall to the ground after he took a fatal hit from a shell. I couldn't help him, couldn't even get up from the ground. All my fellow soldiers were dying one by one, and I was left alive. It was a horror that haunted me every night in my dreams. Each of those bodies was my comrade, my friend, and I couldn't do anything to save them. After the battle, I was found only after a few days. I was the only survivor. They found me wounded but alive. It was a real miracle, as others said. But I didn't feel that miracle. I only felt guilt for having survived when everyone else had died. That guilt became a part of me, and I couldn't rid myself of it. Even when everything else returned, Emily helped me deal with this guilt, though it was not easy. She explained that it was part of post-traumatic stress disorder. But for me, it was more than just a diagnosis. It was a burden I carried every day. I couldn't just leave it behind, couldn't forget. She said I had to accept it as part of my past, but that was impossible. Every time I told Emily about these events, they became more real. I began recalling other details, voices of my comrades, the smell of gunpowder, the feeling of sand on my face during battle. These memories hit me like a wave, washing away everything in its path. I remembered how, after the battle, we were evacuated to the base, where I spent several months in recovery. But the more I remembered, the more I began to doubt whether it really happened. Emily said it was normal to doubt the reality of memories, especially when they are so traumatic. She explained that my mind might protect me by distorting or suppressing certain details so I could survive. But these words did not bring relief. I felt that something was hidden in these memories, something that kept me unsettled, and I had to get to the bottom of this labyrinth, even if it threatened my life. I began exploring my past, reaching out to other veterans who served in the same unit. I found a few who survived other battles, but none of them knew what happened on the day when 100 of my comrades died. It was like a black hole in my memory that I couldn't fill. Everyone who could help was dead, and those who survived knew nothing. Then I began to dig deeper. I found reports about the operation that were written a few days after the battle. But these reports were incomplete. They described only the general details, with no mention of why the operation ended in such a catastrophe. I contacted the command, trying to get more information, but I was told that all the documents were classified. This only intensified my feelings. I continued seeing Emily, but our sessions became less productive. I couldn't focus on her words, couldn't accept what she was trying to explain. I felt that my life was a lie, that everything I knew about myself was wrong. My reality was crumbling, and I could no longer trust my own memories. One day, during a session, Emily asked me if I felt that I was hiding something from myself. This question stuck in my mind. Maybe I really was hiding something so terrible that my mind decided to block those memories. But what could it be? I was afraid to know the truth, but at the same time, I couldn't live without it. I continued to investigate, searching for any hints about what might have happened. But the more I searched, the more I felt that this labyrinth had no exit. I began to lose hope of ever finding answers. The dreams continued to torment me, making each day a trial. Every time I tried to remember more about my comrades, I felt like it was more like filling in a puzzle where the pieces didn't fit together. I would recall their names, faces, but couldn't remember how they died. This was the most frightening thing. Not remembering what happened to the people I knew and loved. I started doubting even my own memory. What if all of this was a fabrication? What if these people never existed, and I just created them in my mind to cope with what happened? These questions haunted me, and I didn't know how to find answers. Sarah tried to support me, but even she began to lose patience. She didn't understand why I was so obsessed with these memories, and it started to create a distance between us. She wanted me to return to a normal life, but I couldn't do that. I was too deeply immersed in this labyrinth to work my way back. I realized that the only way to know the truth was to go back to where it all began. I decided that I would go to Afghanistan and see everything with my own eyes. Maybe it would help me remember what I had forgotten, or at least give me some peace. It was a risky step, but I knew that without it, I wouldn't find answers. When I told Emily about it, she wasn't surprised. She understood that I couldn't find peace until I saw the truth. She advised me to be cautious and remember that not all memories are worth uncovering. But I could no longer stop. I was willing to risk everything to find a way out of this labyrinth. Reddit user comments. Veteran brother, I've faced similar issues myself, struggling with war. PTSD can do amazing things to our memories, but sometimes you just need to face the truth to find peace. Mind maze. It's something more than just memories. Perhaps your dreams are your mind's attempt to find answers you're not yet ready to accept. Ghost Hunter 22. I've read about cases where memories are blocked due to trauma. It could be a protective mechanism, but if you feel you need to remember, it's your personal journey, lost and found. I understand your need to visit the site. Sometimes only that helps. But be cautious because what you find might be heavier than you think. Truth seeker, it's all very tangled, but I think you're on the right path. Finding the truth is always hard, but in the end, it might free you from what haunts you. I don't remember exactly when my relationship with Sarah started to deteriorate, but it happened gradually, like a crack in glass that grows larger every day. The dreams wouldn't give me peace, and the more I tried to find answers, the more I distanced myself from her. She couldn't understand why I was so obsessed with these memories, why each day had turned into a quest for something I couldn't even clearly explain. She saw me dissolving in my anxiety, but didn't know how to help, and that only made me feel more guilty. We started arguing more frequently. Sarah wanted me to return to normal life, to be the person I once was, but I was no longer the person she knew. Every conversation turned into a conflict. She talked about the future, about our family, about moving forward. But for me, the past had become the only thing that mattered. I knew our marriage was falling apart, but I couldn't stop. My desire to find answers was stronger than any other feelings. One evening, after another sleepless night, I told Sarah I had to go to the site of the accident. She looked at me as if I had lost my mind. "Why do you need to do this?" she asked, trying to find a rational explanation for my actions. But I couldn't give her an answer. I just knew I had to go back to where it all began. She tried to dissuade me, saying it wouldn't help, that it would only deepen my anxiety. But I had already made my decision. The site of the accident was a few miles from our home. It was an empty road with very little traffic. I went there alone without any support. Sarah refused to come with me, and I didn't insist. Standing by the roadside, I tried to feel something familiar, but everything was just as it had been when they found me, cold and lifeless. I walked back and forth, examining every bush, every stone, hoping something would trigger my memory. But all there was emptiness and silence that pressed down on me. As it began to get dark, I felt reality starting to retreat. The wind blowing along the road seemed to carry with it the whispers of those who had died. I heard voices calling my name, and I couldn't tell if they were my thoughts or something more. I tried to push these visions away, but they only grew clearer. I saw myself, as if from the outside, sitting behind the wheel of a wrecked car, my mind drifting away from my body. I couldn't distinguish between dream and reality. Returning home, I realized that everything was getting worse. The dreams had become more than just part of my night. They began to invade my day. I could no longer tell the difference between what was real and what had occurred in my mind. I saw scenes of battle while just walking down the street. I heard explosions when I woke up at night from my own screams. Sarah tried to comfort me, but her words didn't reach me. I felt like I was losing control of myself. One evening, while sitting in the kitchen drinking coffee, the image of the battle appeared before my eyes again. I saw my comrades, saw Mike falling, and saw myself leaving him on the battlefield. It was too real. I smashed the cup, trying to break free from the vision, but it didn't disappear. I realized I could no longer live like this. I had to find answers, or these dreams would destroy me completely. The next day, I gathered my strength and decided it was time to return to Afghanistan. This decision was extremely risky, but I knew there was no other way. I had to see the place where everything happened with my own eyes. Sarah was against it. She screamed that it was pointless, that I was just putting myself in danger. But I no longer listened. I had to do it. Even if it meant ending our marriage, I knew that returning to Afghanistan would be dangerous. The country was still engulfed in conflict, and I wasn't sure if I could find what I was looking for. But the desire to find answers was stronger than the fear. I booked a flight to Kabul, even though I had no concrete plan. I just knew I had to go. When the plane landed in Kabul, I was overwhelmed by a sense of déjà vu. The air was hot and stifling, as if the city itself was suffocating from the tension that had plagued it for years. I felt like a stranger in this world, but at the same time, something inside me told me I was on the right path. I didn't know where to start, but something was pulling me forward like a magnet. I rented a car and headed towards Kunduz, the place where the terrible battle had taken place. The road was dangerous, but I didn't stop. The landscapes of Afghanistan changed around me, from barren plains to mountain ridges, and each mile brought new memories. I saw scenes from the past, like ghosts reminding me of what I couldn't avoid. When I arrived in Kunduz, I was filled with a sense of fear and anxiety. I saw the same buildings, the same roads that I had patrolled with Mike, but now everything was deserted, as if life had left this place along with us. I walked through the village, searching for familiar faces, but there was no one. The silence was deafening. I felt that something was wrong here, but I couldn't understand what exactly. I found the place where we had been ambushed. It looked just like it did in my memories, but now it was empty. I stood in the exact spot where I had seen Mike fall, and relived those moments again. The battle scenes began to blur with reality. I saw mines exploding, bullets flying, but it was all just in my head. I couldn't distinguish the past from the present. I fell to my knees, trying to piece together everything that had happened. My mind was on the brink. I knew that somewhere here there should be an answer, but I couldn't find it. Everything felt so real that I could no longer trust my senses. I felt like I was going insane, but I couldn't stop. After I returned to the hotel, I spent the entire night trying to comprehend what was happening to me. I tried over and over to replay the events in my mind, but they remained as blurry as dreams I couldn't remember. I was convinced that the place where I lost my memory must have held some answer, but it remained a mystery to me. The next morning, I decided to ask the locals. Maybe someone among them had seen or knew something about the battle, but every attempt to question people ended in failure. They either knew nothing or were unwilling to speak. I began to feel that these events had been erased from memory, not only by me but by everyone. I spent a few more days in Kunduz, but found no answers. I felt shattered and exhausted. My mind was at its limit, and I knew I couldn't take it anymore. But I also knew that I couldn't go home without finding what I was looking for. After returning to Kabul, I decided to revisit the ambush site. I thought that maybe something had changed, that I might see the place differently now. But when I got there, everything was the same. An empty road, a cold wind carrying memories. I found no answers, only a sense of emptiness. I realized that this journey hadn't given me what I was searching for. It only showed me how deep my wound was, how detached I had become from reality. I returned with a sense of defeat. Sarah was waiting for me, but I was no longer the person she knew. I was broken, shattered, and didn't know what to do. Returning home was painful. I felt like I had let down everyone who believed in me. I couldn't find answers, couldn't stop my nightmares. My relationship with Sarah deteriorated further. She saw that I had changed, that I was no longer the person I used to be, and although she tried to help, I couldn't allow her to. Now, back in our house, I felt like a stranger. I sat in our living room and looked at the photographs Sarah had placed on the shelves, trying to remember what our life had been like before all this. But those memories seemed distant and unreachable. I could no longer discern where the past ended and the present began. Every day, I felt my mind slowly falling apart. The dreams continued to haunt me, and I could no longer trust my senses. I understood that I was going crazy, but I couldn't stop. I became a prisoner of my own mind. Reddit, user, comments. Real reality. It sounds like you're going through a real hell. Going back to the scene of the events might have only intensified your nightmares. Maybe it's time to see a specialist again. Scarred soul. Sometimes the truth can be more destructive than we expect. I think you might already be too far gone. Echo of War. I know what it's like to try to find answers, but only get more questions. Afghanistan left deep scars on all of us. Hang in there, brother. Lost and found again. It's hard to understand what's real. Past haunts. This journey might have shown you that sometimes. After returning from Afghanistan, my nightmares became even more persistent. Each night, I found myself back on the battlefield where my comrades had died. But now, these dreams were more vivid, more brutal. I saw every detail, every moment when my friends fell one by one. Their faces, twisted in pain and fear, haunted me in the darkness. I tried to find answers, but instead, I only delved deeper into my own torment. One night, the dream was particularly vivid. I stood in the middle of the field, surrounded by the sounds of explosions and machine gun fire. Everything felt so real that I could smell the smoke and feel the hot desert wind on my skin. I saw my comrades falling one by one, and I couldn't do anything to save them. It was the same battle that had haunted me all these years, but this time, there was something different. I felt like it wasn't just a dream, but something more, a warning or a revelation. Suddenly, I heard a scream. It was Mike. He was falling to the ground, his eyes filled with pain and despair. I ran to him, trying to help, but I couldn't reach him. Each step was like wading through thick fog, and the more I tried, the more I felt helpless. When I finally got close, he looked at me and whispered something I couldn't understand. His eyes closed, and he died in my arms. This moment stayed with me. Even after I woke up, I couldn't shake the feeling that something important was hidden in this dream. I tried to remember what Mike had said before he died, but his words were blurry, elusive. I replayed that moment over and over in my mind, trying to piece all the fragments together. It was like trying to assemble a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit. Eventually, I realized that this dream wasn't random. My subconscious was trying to show me something I didn't want to see. I returned to the memories of the battle and began to analyze every moment. I recalled receiving orders from the commander, how we prepared for the ambush, how we all understood it would be a tough operation, but something was wrong. All these years, I had tried to understand why I was the only one who survived when everyone else had died. And then it hit me. I was not just a participant in that battle. I was its cause. It was I who gave the order that led to the death of my comrades. I knew how we ended up under fire, how I panicked and made the wrong decision that led to disaster. My actions, my mistake, were the cause of all the deaths. This truth that I had been trying to hide from myself all these years finally emerged. In this realization, I was overcome with horror. I was responsible for the deaths of my friends. It was a truth that my mind had tried to block out, but now it surfaced. My labyrinth of memories, all those dreams, all those fears, they were just attempts by my mind to protect me from the harsh reality. But now, with everything recalled, I felt that this burden could break me. I met with Dr. Reynolds again, but I was no longer the person I once was. I told her about my dream, about what I had remembered. She listened intently, without any judgment, and when I finished, she said, "Jackson, accepting the truth is the first step toward healing. You need to understand that you did everything you could in that situation. War forces us to make difficult decisions, and sometimes they have terrible consequences. But you must find a way to live with it." Her words made little sense, but they did not ease my pain. I still felt guilty, but now I knew what I had to do. I had to accept this truth as part of myself and find a way to move forward. It was the only thing that could bring me peace. I decided that I would no longer run from it. I had to tell my story to free myself from it. Returning home, I began to write. It wasn't easy. Every word, every memory brought me pain, but I knew it was necessary. I wrote about my experiences in Afghanistan, about the decision I made that cost my friends' lives. I wrote about my dreams, about how they had haunted me all these years. It was my way of trying to find forgiveness, to free myself from this burden. When I finished, I felt a part of the weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't a complete release, but it was a beginning. I sent my manuscript to the publisher, hoping that my experience might help someone else going through something similar. Perhaps my words could offer hope that even from the darkest labyrinth, one can find a way out. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. The dreams hadn't disappeared entirely, but they had become less intrusive. I realized that accepting the truth had given me the strength to move forward. It wasn't easy, and I knew I would continue to struggle with this guilt for a long time. But now I was ready. Sarah noticed the changes in me. We began to talk more, to discuss what had happened. She was the one who stayed with me even when everything seemed hopeless. I am grateful to her for this, and now I know that our love can endure these trials. We plan to start over, slowly, step by step, trying to rebuild what was lost. Now I know that the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than a lie, even if that lie was created to protect oneself. I am no longer afraid of my memories. I have accepted them as part of myself, as part of my past that now belongs to me. I have navigated this labyrinth and found a way out, and it has given me peace. This journey has not been easy, and I know many challenges lie ahead, but now I am ready for them. I know that Sarah is with me, that I am not alone, and most importantly, I have found peace within myself. It doesn't mean the pain is gone, but now I can live with it. This was my struggle, and I overcame it by finding the truth in the labyrinth of memories. Thank you for listening to my story. Feel free to share your thoughts on my story in the comments below.